You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Hello again, everyone. This is Doug, and you're listening to another episode of Leadership Powered by Common Sense. I am very honored today to have with me a guest who has some incredible milestone achievements in her own coaching career. She is an authority on a number of things, has a book that has come out, and more recently been recognized as a Thinkers 50 award recipient for her work, she and her partner in their coaching endeavors. Her name is Margaret Moore. She goes by Coach Meg. And Margaret, welcome to the show.
Doug, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, you were telling me a little bit about your journey, and I want to recap that a little bit if we can for the guests so they understand some of that backstory. You were explaining your journey coming out of the healthcare world into the leadership coaching space. Could you recap that for us one more time?
Yeah. So first, Doug, like you, I'm an MBA, proud. 40 years ago, it was best education experience I've ever had. So I was kind of wired for the C-suite. I spent 17 years in biotechnology, of which many were in senior roles, CEO, COO, CFO. And but I had a vision that for the coach being a new professional on the healthcare team. And I focused mostly on that over the last 25 years and founding 3 coaching organizations in order to make that happen. So it was school, the Institute of Coaching, which is an academic institute funding research, translating science into coaching, and then a credentialing organization for health and well-being coaches called the National Board for Health and Wellness Coaches. So I have 4 startups under my belt, including a biotech. So I'm kind of this mix of a leader and a coach. And then this, but the heart of it is that I love science. I mean, my first husband and my current husband are scientists. I talk about science all the time. I read papers, and most coaches are not comfortable diving into journals and scientific papers. It's not easy, but it's a world where most leaders haven't read. You know, there are thousands of leadership studies, and nobody's read the work. So I've played this translational role, which is to read the papers, look for the gem. You know, what's the insight that's really cool that's in this? What would the scientists say if they were right here? You know, I like the scientists. I go and read about them. I try to understand what they found, about the nature of human nature. And then I try to write it and share it and teach it and coach it through all avenues, bring it to coaches and to leaders. So that's my sweet spot. And I'm not a scientist. I'm not even a psychologist. I'm a biologist with an MBA. But I've been doing this a long time. And I wrote 100 research translation articles at the Institute over a few years, which is why the Science of Leadership book was possible, because I don't think I could have read 500 papers and known what to do with them and how to sort them and how to put things in buckets and knit them together into a narrative that showed you the whole of it. And so that's, and I'm building an AI system now to bring this multiplicity to leaders and coaches and healthcare professionals. So somehow it's all become a whole.
Yeah.
It wasn't along the way, but I think I stayed in it long enough and stayed with the depth and breadth long enough that I now feel as though, I finally got to where I want to be. And now I can really disseminate what I've done.
Well, when I first became aware of your work, I was curious and highly interested in it because at some level, I've always talked to my clients. I too am a been there, done that kind of coach, having been in executive roles in prior lives. And but as I talk to people, I do talk about there's kind of this notion of a blend in leadership that it's part art and part science. And to the extent we get into, well, what is the science part? Well, you can start talking about human behavior, you can talk about personality analysis, you can talk about a lot of other elements, brain science, and many other things that are, I believe so powerful in getting the point across. When you do dip into some of that body of knowledge, you realize, oh, there's a reason my team reacts to me this way. And it's not just chance. It's not just totally at the relational level, but there's a deeper layer of what is ultimately a science aspect of it.
Exactly. And my work on the multiplicity of mind, so I loved chemistry and I loved the periodic table. And I was unique in reading 3 books about it in my university course in chemistry because I really wanted to understand. And the science of leadership starts with those elements. And I think there are elements, they're probably physics originally that turn into chemistry and then turned into the mind. So I really see the mind as as having some structure, different from psychologists where there's too many structures. I do think there is one structure of elements, and that everything else. So it's both. There's both simplicity and complexity together because that's how nature is, right? A tree, grass. There's this beautiful structure and also randomness. It works. Things move. Living systems are interconnected. So I think that understanding that there are some common themes and elements, and then they all mix and match and create this immense complexity. So yes, as a leader, as a follower, there's things that you can't do in this situation that you can do in others. And so the elements mix in different ways. But once you understand those fundamentals, then you can mix and match and you are able to coach with this immense breadth of, both simplicity and complexity coming to your mind to help the others at any one time.
Well, so with that background of knowledge, I'm going to challenge you with the ever-present raging debate that I've heard for decades. Are leaders born or bred?
Uh, well, um, I mean, it's both. Um, I do think leaders are leaders young. And some people find their way there and find they have skills they never knew. They are humble, they're servant. The servant leaders often don't know. But I mean, I was sent to a leadership camp in my physical education camp class when I was 15. I got picked. I had no idea why I got picked. In my girlfriend who was in that class with me, we were like 50, yeah, 15. So I do think, and I think the components of that are one's thinking abilities. So what a leader has to deal with more complexity because you're leading yourself, others, and system, and then the outside system all at the same time simultaneously. So you're operating on many levels all the time. You're going up and down the elevator, around the world, 360. It's really a 360 thing. So you have to have a brain that has the ability to be both agile and to process all that information and hold it and organize it and synthesize it. So there's a thinking side to this, and I hope no one's offended by this, but in Myers-Briggs, there's the NTs, the INTs, the ENTs, the INTJs, ENTJs, Ps, and then there's also the INFs and the ENFs, but the NTs have the ability to combine intuition and thinking automatically. It just happens. And if you add that good education, I mean, that's where you don't have to be brilliant, but you get really good education. Like my MBA completely reorganized my brain because we had to process 100 pages of cases every single day, like week after week after week after week. you just get better at processing a lot of information. I mean, with the lawyers that go to law school, MDs that go to medical school, you go through a training like that, you can't help but come out with a better brain. You push yourself to read 500 papers, your brain works better. So you can have a good brain, but you can still really develop it. But I do think that there's plenty of NFs that are leaders too that are good thinkers, because thinking isn't all about personality. There's other ways that you can, but I do think it's an intuitive thinking. It's creativity, it's strategy, it's analysis. If you can't do that and handle all that information, you're not going to make it, because it's just too much. So that, in that sense, there are some basic building blocks that people need to have. They don't have to have good grades. There's plenty of leaders that failed high school. It's not, there's many, but there's some natural ability, whether you come at it from the feeling side or the thinking side, or there's definitely people who are more wired, who can just hold a crowd, who can be influential. So there's that, but there's also a lot you can do to build those skills. And I think it's more about, do you want to or not? Because to lead requires taking on way more stress and strain, because the higher you go, the further you have to fall. And if you can't handle that intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, physically, you don't want it. You want the comfort of being this, the brilliant contributor, still working really hard, like being a scientist or being an AI engineer, or, something where you can really have a brilliant mind, but you're not worried about others and systems and teams and all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's natural talent and there's orientation, but there's also, you really want to do it. Like, you're okay with doing, like, you're willing, it's not just, sometimes it's pure ego-driven ambition, but it has to be more than that, because you have to be able to take it.
Right.
And
Right.
it's not easy. You know that. You've been
Right.
there. It's really hard. I mean, I always say I enjoy coaching as a break from leading. Thank goodness I don't have to do it all the time. I
Yeah.
get to help other people, because
Yeah.
it gives me a headache.
Yeah.
It's hard.
And one thing I've noticed on that fundamental question, are leaders born or bred? When I do encounter a client that, by all indications, you could probably classify as a natural born leader, the thing I find interesting is they kind of don't get it. I mean, and what I mean by that is it's just when we start talking about principles of leadership and methods and approaches and even some of the science, they kind of go, well, sure, of course.
They take it for granted.
They're taking it for
They're
granted.
like the fish in the water. They don't even notice that they're a
They've
different
been
fish.
doing it
Yeah.
since probably elementary school,
Yeah.
whatever it may be. And there's this sort of innate acceptance of it. And it's like,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
a
I'm already
natural. It's
doing
like,
that.
this was just what yeah.
And whereas the others who are being challenged maybe by the leadership around them to step up to a new level, so we're going to fund a coaching engagement for you, those are the ones that, are sometimes challenged by some of these concepts and ideas, because it's the first time they've had to think about it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, their minds have been fully occupied with important work. And they, the thing about leading is you have to develop other people. It's really not about you.
Right.
A lot of the time it is. I mean, there's in the book, we have a chapter on transformational leadership, which is the creativity and innovation, and then the servant leadership, which is more stability, security, like keep the system stable. And they're very different. They don't, some people are more wired to do one than others, that they're better at service, or they're better at relational, and that works in certain kinds of industries. And where the transformational folks, the entrepreneurs, the folks that break barriers and change the world, they're different types. So there's a lot of different ways you can lead too. And that means some people are going to fit in some circumstances and not others. I mean,
Right.
leading is an amazing endeavor in terms of, influencing a group of people to move towards a shared goal. It's a lot. It's a big deal. And organizations are different as humans. Every
Right.
organization is like a human. It has its own personality. It has its own foibles, its own, strengths and talents. And so, yeah, it's a beautiful topic. It really is. You can never get tired of it.
Well, and for older, more established companies, there's an inherent culture that has evolved that may or may not be friendly to certain kinds of leadership, and it doesn't make it wrong. It's just different.
It doesn't, it's not the way we do it around here. Yeah.
Right, right. And I know I had an engagement that I speak of occasionally many years ago where a new incoming CEO decided this long-standing company needed a new culture because the old one was very heavy-handed command and control. And current data about employee retention was telling them they're losing the young talent because young talent doesn't suffer that style regardless of what else might be perceived as an opportunity in the business or the industry. It doesn't matter
They
if you're
don't
going to
want
be,
parents.
yeah, they don't want more parents or dictators, even go so far as to say. So he took it upon himself to bring leadership together and say, folks, we've got to change this if we're going to survive in the long run. And it was, as I read his, maybe the word that pops in my mind, his manifesto about this, that sounds bad, but his vision, I thought it was very profound and very smart, because I mean, he's talking 20, 30 years down the road,
Yeah.
believing that they will exist, but in order to do so, they've got to change that leadership culture.
Yeah, to fit the new. Yeah. Well, I mean, the emergence of self-determination theory in our lifetimes, pinpointed autonomy as the number one human drive and need. And that's been there through human history, but it's only in this era that it's been given a voice.
Mm.
Humans have suffered under the weight of people telling them what to do, since the beginning of humans working together. And I mean, there's lots of cultures and models of more democratic, let's get everybody to self-actualize. Um, and Gary Hamel's work, the book Humanocracy, is a wonderful piece of work around dissolving the 6 layers of bureaucracy and turning it up, flipping it upside down, and having the folks on the front line be empowered to do finance and IP and innovation and legal and HR, so that they're whole. They're whole. So it's a long time coming, but it's our nature. It's Taoism. It goes back thousands of years. We just kind of ignored it because the bosses wanted to be bossy. And so it's not like the young generation, the young talent is doing anything surprising. It's just, it's finally okay to want to be the master of your own ship as much as you can. So, both,
Well,
the duality, you need to have your own leaders too. You need to be authentic and have your own enough autonomy, but you also need to empower others equally. So you have to do both now. So we're finally getting to that place in human history where this core need of being the author of my own life is finally, and my work life is finally coming to fruition.
well, in this one scenario I'm talking about, it was interesting as we got in, and the company invested a lot of money in bringing in fundamentally an army of coaches to work with the top 6 layers, as you described, to affect this change. And it was quickly discovered that one of the key drivers on why the model perpetuated was that as people got promoted up, they assumed the profile of the person before them
Yeah.
because that was the
That's their
definition of
business.
success.
Yeah, yeah, they learned from their teachers. Yeah. Yeah, and it's actually not that easy to turn it around because people are used to taking direction and not actually, they don't just instantly take charge, get in the driver's seat and figure things out. It takes some effort. I mean, some people have it naturally. Like the entrepreneurs in the world don't need bosses.
Right, right, right.
They might need some governance, but they don't really need a boss.
Well,
And
I
from an
think
early age. And so, but a lot of people aren't entrepreneurs. And so it takes a while for them to get into the driver's seat and start thinking for themselves and start being proactive and start generating stuff instead of waiting for it to come. So it does it's not no small feat to shift that. It's like
right,
healthcare. We want people to take better care of their health. It hasn't happened yet.
yeah,
Not
right,
really.
right,
People
right.
are not owning. That's why, I've been working so hard to get coaches into healthcare because we can help people have their own goals and be accountable for that.
Mhm.
They're not just being recipients of medicine. So it's it takes a while, but it is the way we're going for sure.
Well, and related to this, I believe, is the notion, and again, maybe it's under the category of styles of leadership, but one observation I've had over the years, and I do find clients frequently that are flip-flopping between these two things I'm getting ready to describe, and that is leading from the front or leading from the rear. And uh, I had one client specifically I'm thinking of who left a company where she described the amazing intellectual brilliance of these people that she was working for. And it was easy to lead from the rear, where she just said, "That's our goal over there, go get it." And they just took off, and they were self motivated, they were intellectually and skill wise capable. And it was just kind of this, she was sort of standing on the hill directing, somewhat like a military general might do in a big battle. But then she moved to a company, and this was the company that had engaged me to work with her. And she said, "Oh my God." And she said, "I have to tell them everything. I have to." And I said, "Well, that's leading from the front. You have to pull them through. You can't just let them go because they've
Well,
never previously been empowered. They've never had that privilege, and they don't know what to do with it."
yeah, they don't have the skill. They haven't been trained to do it. Yeah. Yeah, but it's all about waking that up. It's waking it up um, so people feel as though they've got what's important to them can come out, and then they have to learn skills and ways of working that they've not done. So you're actually asking them to lead when they've been following.
Right.
And then you're going to deal with, all that happens. But I mean, as coaches, this is what we like, right? We like to see this opening up and this unfolding of people and becoming something much bigger than they were. That's that's one of the reasons I went into coaching after my biotech career, because I realized, I'd had successes there, but I was kind of mother hen for the scientists, like in the sense that they were, I was in my 30s, so I was not that much, probably we were all in the same age, but they were very unfamiliar with the business world in biotechnology. And I got as much out of watching them grow into fully functioning business people while maintaining their scientific work, their careers, as I did from the business. And I realized, wow, this watching people grow is actually it's a compassionate, nourishing thing to do. And so, yeah, so you have as leaders, you have to actually like it. You actually want to see people grow and unfold into something they never saw, which is
Yeah.
back to the
Yeah.
born or bred, you're breeding. That's probably not the best metaphor, but you are,
Right.
you're really trying to cultivate that, and you have to pull out the strengths and build on those and course correct, and it's a lot of hands-on. It's a lot of work.
Well, and I think overarching that is a very common theme of the level of trust, in a lot of those organizations where people are holding back, there's ultimately a trust factor that somewhere along the line either was never developed properly or it was betrayed, and so they've
Yeah,
pulled back.
they put their head back in the shell. Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
it
Well,
becomes,
that's the challenge, right? Because what happens is people will fail because they haven't done it before. And if you chop their heads off, metaphorically, and judge them harshly for that, then
right.
you're not going to get any further. You have to, you know, I loved Bob Keegan's work around, creating cultures where there's a lane which is you're performing, and then the lane when you're learning, and they're different. And when you're learning, you're clumsy and awkward and uncomfortable. And when you're performing, you got it together. And you have to make space for both, or you're not going to get the development. And that goes against the grain, because performing is the thing that we get paid for.
Right.
And so,
Right.
yeah, you have to really be okay with learning and the awkwardness of it.
Well, I don't know if this is a fair question or not, but in thinking about the body of work in your book, what are a couple of the really big overarching themes and takeaways that you're presenting in that book?
Well, I'll just pick a couple, two or three if I can, what comes to mind. So, you know, emotional intelligence is all about self-awareness, regulating your emotions, expressing the good ones, the drive, the ambition, the striving, and holding back the anger and the frustration, which is, what you own. And then engaging with others and their emotions. But the next stage of that is getting to the quiet ego, which is Jack Bauer and Hattie Waymont's work. They've defined the quiet ego, which is a fabulous idea, because leaders with quiet egos can go anywhere. There's not going to be any resistance, right? But to get to the quiet ego, you actually have to integrate the ego noise. You actually have to turn, and the brain knows how to do this, how to turn the anger and the frustration in your own mind into strength and growth, and leaders have to do this over and over and over again. You got to go to bed, wake up the morning feeling stronger. You need to be healthy. You have to, I mean, in coaching, we make it happen almost at will, but leaders have to learn how to do that. So the destiny of emotions are integration into to a quiet ego. So that's a big add-on to emotional intelligence. So that's the first thing. The the second one, I guess I would say, well, I guess I'm kind of staying with the first. Yeah, the second one I would talk about is agility. And agility is 360. So you're agile mentally, cognitively, like you can go from fine detail. And there's been a few articles about that. Even CEOs need to get into the weeds and really work it and not be afraid of it. Their brains have to, and then you have to go way out to the big picture and talk to some, you know, senior politicians or governmental leaders, right? And so you need this agility. You need the emotional agility. You need to deal with the polarities, the opposite views right in front of you, not just, outside, but inside your organization. You have to be able to go back and forth without getting attached to any of it, to see and integrate it into something better. There's just so many different forms of agility. Creativity is agility. Disruptive change is a balance between stabilizing and disrupting. So agility is, being comfortable in between stability and disruption. You don't get stability and you don't get disruption. You have to be okay bouncing back and forth. So that's leaders need that. And then I guess compassion, I've come to really see that differently. So compassion is kind of taken over from empathy because it's bigger. It's about attuning, but not feeling yourself, not getting your mirror neurons in the mix, because then you feel it and then you carry it and then it's a burden and then you get burned out. You need to see it, understand it, and help. So you're staying above, you feel it a little bit. Yeah, the tears, you might feel some of the suffering or some of the joy, but you can't stay there. You have to stay at compassion and broadly, which I think is the basis for strategy and wisdom. So compassion is a big idea. It's compassion for all the forces. You can understand and respect and feel um, in a way that doesn't deplete you, but then informs strategic approaches. I think that's a big deal. And then, I think transformational is the best one, but I'm not going to go there. I'm going to go to shared leadership. So shared leadership is the hardest one. In all my workshops and talks since when I've done a survey, this is the one that people generally perform, rank number 9 of 9. Sharing is the ability to create leaders. There's a wonderful case study that was written up by Violetta Splitter, who's the head of strategy at Oxford Business School. Well, I think it's Oxford. And so there's this big insurance company with 50,000 people in Europe. CEO came in, company was in a downward spiral, losing money. He had like 4 months to create a turnaround plan. And he insisted that he get they had to screen them, 40 frontline people, like on the front line in the offices, to work with him on the strategic plan. And so they met every week or so for months. And it didn't go well for the longest time because they had a different language than him and they couldn't get through to him. And he would just get distracted and look at his phone and finally they could find a way to bridge what they could see and what could be a strategic plan. And a third of the strategic plan came from this group of frontline employees. Company gained 18 billion in value and sailed off into the sunset. So this CEO, and apparently it wasn't his first time, had the patience to sit with this group for over many months until they could talk in C-suite language and he could understand them and they could create something together. That's sharing leadership. Training, educating, nudging, putting them together to work together to figure it out, having them make lots of mistakes, just that fell flat, that didn't go anywhere. You don't have a clue what we're talking about. That's shared leadership, and that's really hard. Most people don't do that well. I wouldn't say it's my favorite thing to do or the easiest thing to do. You need to do it, but you're doing whatever you need to do to get people to lead better, which comes back to our early point about empowering. So that's the hardest one.
And on that note, the idea of shared leadership, it's bigger than delegation alone, right?
Yes. Well, I mean, I organized it. This is beyond what's in the literature, but I organized the leadership process into the why, the what, and the how. So the why is the values, the vision, the mission, the purpose, the why does this matter? And then the what is the strategy and the plan and the execution, and then the how is all the leadership stuff, right? But in the leadership research world, the how is what they focus on. There's now more on the why. The why has come alive with authentic leadership, ethical leadership, values-based leadership. That's come alive in 20 years. The what, there's very little on strategy. That's management. That's big business school. So then if you think about sharing across the why, what, and how, you have a lot of ways to share. How do we share the development of the why? Which parts of the what do we share? And then the how. Now you've got lots of places to play and you have lots of places to start. So I think I think you have to think about it across some structure, that works. So you can say, well, when can we share? Because the values is everywhere. That's probably a place to share, but maybe you don't share strategy because, I mean, like we tried to get an article published on shared leadership when the book came out. And we didn't. And I think in part because with all this stuff around AI, leaders don't want to share leadership when they're looking at AI and saying, I'm not sure, who's going to be here. I'm not sure which job, So but that's what should happen. Everybody should be empowered to figure out how AI is going to work. And it shouldn't be, it's not going particularly well. It's great. I love AI. I'm working on it myself, but yeah, so it's hard. Shared leadership is hard. And it's the difference between your CEO being successful and not.
Yeah. Well, and I think the common thread through all of this we've been talking about is the notion that I've used a phrase to sum this up. I've said good leaders can get things done with good people, but great leaders build other leaders.
Yeah, that's the whole. Yeah, exactly. They spot them, they cultivate them, they mentor them, they leave a legacy because then it lives on. What they did, it doesn't go out the door when they leave.
Yeah,
they've left, they've baked it into the culture. So that's the best you can hope for.
Yeah, very good. Well, Margaret, this has been fascinating, and I feel like I know I could go on for a long time, and we're not going to do that, but may have you come back again another day. But tell folks the best way to get a hold of you if they're interested in knowing more about your work.
Well, I go to LinkedIn, whatever the dash is, Coach Meg, just Coach Meg or Margaret Moore. That's where I hang out on social media, and my website is coachmeg.com, and the book website is scienceofleadership.com. So those are all good places.
Well, thank you. And as always, folks, we're going to have those links in the show notes. And this is the part of the show I like to remind you we do have a video version of this over on YouTube, channel by the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Check out the archives over there. And we've got a lot of things going on, and looking forward to the new year as we get into 2026. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah,
Hard
boy, do we
to
need
believe
more
we're there.
and we need more common sense, Doug. My goodness.
Well, yeah, amen to that. We sure do. Well, Meg, thank you again for sitting in, and I'm going to tell everybody goodbye. Go out there and make it a great day.
Okay, thank you. Bye, everybody.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.